Hello, my name is Clay Schulte, and this is my final project for BIA 4010. I decided to look at the Triple Crown horse races, which include the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont Stakes. I was interested in this topic because I grew up riding horses and have pretty much watched every race since I can remember. So I've shown rodeo events but never raced them, but I'm an avid fan. So I managed to find a data set that included data from the years 2015 to 2019. And I think that if you've watched the races, there tends to be quite a bit of predictability in the races. Um, Most of the time, the winners at least place first, second, or third. Every once in a while, there's an upset, but so I wanted to dive deeper into that and see maybe if I could find any anomalies in that, if my predictions, if what I've just naturally observed is shown in the data. Hold on a second. Um, so yeah, so I wanted to look at odds, pole position, weather effects, things like that. So let me go ahead and start with my data set. This is my Excel data set, and as you can see, I have two main sheets. I decided to split it up into actual, because multiple horses raced multiple races, I had to pretty much use a key for race ID, which I have in my track. So each track corresponds with the year and or each race ID corresponds to the year and track that it was raced on. And then my horses are um, the actual numbers and odds for each particular horse for that corresponding race. As you can see, race ID is my key field here. It corresponds on the left side here. So I've got many different things to look at: track condition, weather, temperatures. With horses, I have horses, jockey, trainer even, then odds, of course, and their final place. So let's go ahead and look at my dashboard. So my dashboard, I've tried to answer all the questions I wanted to in one interface here. And some of those questions are, what is just the general total effect versus odds in final place? So I used this top left one, odds versus final place, to kind of show that. And I put a reference line in there as well to show the kind of the line of best fit, if you will. And that will help me to see, is it a linear progression? Is our odds, linearly tied to final place? Another question I had was, do poor track conditions favor the horses with higher odds, or vice versa? So this weather outcomes by odds graph is intended to show that. Then I actually wanted to get some numbers down here in my two tables that will show the average odds and average finish, based on post position and odds. And lastly, I wanted to answer the question of top two, or just the top horses in the Kentucky Derby, how they fare going into the latter two races. Because not all races race all three horses, but it's pretty much unheard of that the winner does not try for the Triple Crown. The Triple Crown is an achievement, so if you win the first one, you got to try to win the second one, and if you win the second one, you sure as hell are gonna go for the third. So I want the bottom right graph is intended to show that it's a bar and bar chart. So the first As you can see, the middle line here is the Kentucky Derby finish. So Kentucky Derby won, and then the outer bar is their Preakness finish. So as you can see, only a handful of horses have been able to repeat a win in the last 15 years, pretty much. You can sort by track, everything but the bottom right graph. So if you want to just look at a couple of them or do that, then it'll break down each of these. One thing to notice is that I noticed at least is Belmont Stakes were pretty much always nice weather. It was either just cloudy or clear. So if you really want to look more at the weather conditions, you'd sort by these two, and that gives you a clearer picture. And also down here in odds and final versus final place and post versus final place gives you an idea of the best post positions. It looks like some of the middle ones are better, but I'm going to get more into the analysis by going into my story that I've created for you guys. Just going to double check on my recording. Yep, everything's working right. So like I said, here's the overview of my data from the Triple Crown races for the years 2005 to 2019. So to answer some of my questions, I'm going to deep dive this look at odds versus final place. Each one of these circles represents a horse on the track. So as you can see, just for example, we can go up here, Country House. They all have weird names. In the Kentucky Derby, his odds were 66, and he placed 1. So that's definitely thrown a little bit off the lines here. But what I notice is, all three of these best line fits, and if you look at just kind of the grouping and the density in the bottom left, going up towards the top right, for the most part, the data does show that odds are directly tied to the final place of the horse. If you notice though, in the Kentucky Derby, this line is less steep, which shows, of course, there's many more horses that run the Kentucky Derby as well, so that's another thing to take into account. So, but it just shows that the first race is up in the air more than, say, the Preakness. See how much steeper that line is, and it's actually pretty similar to the Belmont Stakes. If you look at all three, definitely see it for the latter two races. So I think that does answer my question of the total effect of odds versus actual performance, and for the most part, I think odds are a good indicator of how you can expect a horse to finish. Moving on, I'm looking at post position and see how that affects. Because I remember watching some races and them saying, "Oh, he drew a bad post position. That could doom this favorite." And of course, the Kentucky Derby has more horses generally, so there are some added positions. But if you look at the data as a whole, then you can see down here in number 13, pretty good numbers, if not the best average numbers for all. So it looks like the outside is a good place to start. The post position 1's on the inner, but if you look at 5, that looks like, user error. It looks like another pretty solid one. So post position can have an effect, but I wouldn't say it's the law. So another point I'd like to make is the top finishers in the Kentucky Derby rarely meet the same expectations in the latter two races. As you see, for the 4 horses or 5 horses in the last 15 years that have won both of them, there's another 8 or 9 that have done considerably worse. And if you look at the top 2, I decided to look at the top 2. Similar story. Exaggerator did one. He did better, but the rest of them definitely did worse. And that's due to possibly these other horses having more rest. Probably the most interesting outcome of my analysis was I expected that bad weather might actually, be adverse to the better odds horses, and it kind of even the playing field. But if you look at the data, it looks like the horses with the best odds actually perform better in these sloppy conditions. When it's foggy, 100%, rainy, 100%. When it's showering out, 2/3. You look over where it's clear out, much, much different, So, and I think if you look at each race, it's very similar as we looked at earlier. So in conclusion, I think odds are a good indicator of a horse's chance to win. If you look at horse racing as a whole, I think that you might get some different figures, but the Triple Crown brings the best horses in the world all in one place. So, and it's heavily researched, heavily gambled upon. So those final odds right before the race, they have all the knowledge that people put in these large wagers and really do affect the odds. So in conclusion, I learned a lot of things through this analysis. I definitely realized that the way I put my data together, my data source before importing it into Tableau, that I could have done some things different. I would have liked to, especially when dealing with creating hierarchies and being able to, I kept trying to basically do things that Tableau could not handle. Like I was thinking more like a programmer rather than have all of my data segmented properly in the tables. So I was having to do a lot of, things as far as creating, calculated measures and dimensions. So I think I learned a lot by actually doing this project, and I think by doing more and more analyses like this, you know how to better prepare your data ahead of time, and that keeps you from having to backtrack and almost start all over when you realize, oh, my data source doesn't allow me to perform this because of the way I put it all together. So yeah, that's just a little bit about what I've learned by researching the Triple Crown. So thanks for watching, guys. Bye.